Okay, so looking at the design, and yeah, it's always good to have a look at the existing conditions from the video footage as well. And I noticed some of you had some good findings around pedestrian movements and those sort of things. One that I'd be particularly interested in is it's got this kind of funny angle to this intersection, which is always going to cause some challenges at one point or another. And I'd just say that entry angle of that slip lane is going to cause some issues. You can see it's quite an angle. And we know that if a car's sitting down here, as they come up to here, the ability to turn their head starts to decline there. So that angle is going to cause issues. So I go to this, I would write in the finding section, the angle of the slip lane entry, I'd put a snip of that, is less than desirable and will require drivers to turn their head at quite an angle. This will potentially cause drivers to pay or to make less considered movements out of the slip lane. This may result in side impact crashes with a slight angle between passenger vehicles. So that's a particular crash I'm concerned about. The factors that may increase, so this risk will be increased for older drivers. What I probably wouldn't say at night. A lot of the time at night does count. I think at night this might actually be less of an issue because the headlights would probably be sort of more easily identified out of peripheral vision and the like. Older drivers will find it especially hard to make that. And then I'd say that the speed, it's also the 70 kilometre speed limit on Canterbury Road will increase the likelihood and severity of this crash. The Austroads guide recommends 70 less than or above that, depending on where you're taking your angle from, 70-degree entry as the minimum there, which will be less than that. So there is actually some standards and guidelines to back that one up, not that there needs to be, of course. Then I would put in sort of what are we thinking about the energy of that crash? And we know a right angle crash is around that 50 kilometre per hour. We know this is going to have more angle on it, but potentially with bullet vehicle speed of 70. I'm going to still say above tolerable limits. So that's above our safe system tolerable limits. How am I going to risk rate this? Well, I think it's going to be, I'm going to go infrequent and likely. So I think that there will be probably occasional issues that are going to be more minor from this, but I'm more interested in the higher severity ones. So I'm going to go with that one, infrequent, the ones that sort of get through. And so that I'll put that as a moderate risk. So infrequent in here and likely here and moderate there. Then what I'm going to recommend there, consider squaring up the entry angle of the slip lane. Well, I'm going to say actually consider measures to reduce the bullet vehicle speed on Canterbury Road. This could include raised safety platforms or speed limit reductions, and also consider squaring up the entry angle of the slip lane. And of those, the primary treatment would actually be reducing the speed, even though, you know, our issue is solely focused around this slip lane entry angle. But the crash I'm concerned about is an intersection bullet vehicle crash. So if we have the speeds lower here when these incidents occur, we'll be taking the likelihood of severity way down, which gets us out of fatal serious injury. The squaring up of that is actually a supporting treatment, because if we square it up more, we know that we're going to lessen the likelihood of the crash, but we know we'll still have intersection crashes coming out of here and out of here. So we're still left with an intersection crash risk. So it would be supporting, and the speed limit reduction I'd probably put as supporting as well, because we know that if we drop that from 70 kilometers per hour to 60, that's a good thing. We'll lessen the likelihood of a little bit the severity of crashes, but we will still have vehicles exceeding that. There's no physical things to slow them down. You know, it's relying on that. It's still a straight, fairly fast run through there. Yeah, so without writing that up in a lot of detail, that's just one there, and there's, you know, there's plenty of other. I mean, that was a kind of technical one, but you could imagine driving along there and trying to crank your head around at this big angle to see what was coming from this lane. The one thing I did notice in a couple of the assignments I've looked at, I haven't put any of the marking in yet. I will get to that, and I'll provide some feedback. The risk ratings were higher than I would expect to see for the issues. As I talked about, working backwards can often be a decent way to do that. But, you know, the high severity, so death and serious injury crashes across the network, there are lots of them every year. At an individual intersection, you start to, you know, bring that down, and attributing it to a particular issue, you know, it's going to be down here a lot of the time. There have to be some pretty, you know, significant infrastructure deficiencies if you're into these frequent and common. Okay, what do you think, Kathy? Is that probably enough detail? People are going to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. A question has come through about estimating the frequency. There's been arguments on the frequency. How do we best estimate the frequency?
It's a good question. I'm just going to open up a different set of slides now, because the New Zealand guidelines have some documentation and some guidance around frequency, but it's not huge. Sorry, I'm just going to. Are you sharing your screen? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take over from you.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yes, good.
So the frequency, yeah, so it's got to include exposure. So you're going to take into account traffic volume out there, or pedestrian volume and the like. For those who've done the safe system assessment course, I mean, we extract that out as its own entity, but it's going to factor into how many, you know, what is the frequency of crashes. The Australians Guide Part 6A, the old one on page 27, had some specifics around that, and of course the new Part 6 has it actually integrated in there in terms of frequency of crashes. So the New Zealand guidance talks about frequent being one of these crashes per year, and the infrequent being one per 10 years. So I suppose you should be, you know, one per 10 years or beyond that. But you've got to link that to the severity you're thinking of. So if you have, every year you have a minor crash, you're down here, but then every 10 years you're thinking you're going to have a high severity crash, you're over here. But if you sort of change there from, so that shouldn't particularly matter. I mean, I'd be more interested in this risk. Sorry, I would be more interested in this risk, the high severity one. I mean, we're trying to address those, but you're still at the same risk level, moderate or moderate. But it's, if you're altering that off this, so you might say, well, I'm going to go here with, I'm going to say it's, common for, low injury, but occasionally we'll get a high severity. Obviously then I'm much more interested in the significant risk outcome there. So you've got to link those two. Doesn't give you any information in between those as how you're going to range that. So yeah, there's a bit of discretion and judgment required on that from individuals. I don't know if that particularly helps. It's pointed you at a few different places where you can get some of that frequency. Yeah, but I suppose something that I often say is people can have a look at past audit reports from experienced auditors. Try and do that as you're starting out auditing. You'll be doing it with senior auditors. They'll guide you. If you sort of look at the crash history of different intersections and different lengths of roads, you get an understanding of the frequency of crashes, which helps calibrate that a little bit in your mind and attributing those to particular issues. But I am seeing what I usually see from people starting out auditing, which is to over risk rate everything because you've sort of identified this possible issue, understandable, and then you can't sort of see anything except for that happening in your mind. And we do want to report that because you identified it, you've sort of clarified in your mind. It's just trying to sort of use that. I think there's a question in there, can you use crash prediction models? Yes, to a degree. It depends which crash prediction model you're thinking about. A lot of, I suppose, crash prediction models aren't refined enough. So if you take pretty much all the commonly available ones, so IRAP, Kiwi RAP, Urban Kiwi RAP, IRR, net risk, risk net, I think is the other one. So net risk and risk net. None of those are refined enough to be able to really utilize them in a road safety audit because you're so precise. I mean, we're picking out particular specifics of a design, and those are such macro tools to look at a network or a length of road or maybe down to a 100-meter segment. But auditing really does rely on that individual's experience, judgment, expertise, understanding of the context of that design and how it plays together. It's not really something we can plug into a generic model and get the answer. But where you can use those is to get an understanding of how things change the frequency of crashes. So how infrastructure change your frequency of crashes. So if you are somebody who plays in IRAP, Kiwi RAP, OzRAP, ANRAM space, and you get in there, you can adjust things like line marking and see the impact that's likely to have at a generic level. I mean, it's kind of crash reduction factor stuff for those who, or crash modification factor stuff, embedded with a little bit more sophistication, but generally it's that. So the amount of influence some different features can have at a generic level. But take that, the one that I just went through, the angle of the slip lane. I mean, that is not going to be picked up in. The only thing that'll be picked up in is like XChemX, which is kinetic energy management model, where you start to delve in. I mean, nobody's going to be using that. Such an obscure modeling tool that nobody's really going to be utilizing that in an audit report. It's going to be a judgment call well over that. Good question, and sorry to sort of babble on a little bit about it. It's sort of, it's a bit of an area of a lot of interest of mine at the moment in the amount of tools that are being brought to market for road safety analysis, which are all fairly generic, high-level strategic network tools, and which ones of those can you actually use at a project level. I mean, great for strategic planning in network and big nationwide speed management plans and big, where are we going to, put our investment. But once you've decided that you're into an actual project, there's not many tools that you can really use to understand the stuff we're talking about here. So we need to just use, individuals' experience and judgment and the like. All right, Kathy, anything else from me? Or
No, I think you're good to carry on, Ken.
Thank you. Do keep your questions coming in, though. That's good. I've got a couple of more road users to get through. And then we are going to give you that actual audit assignment. So it's still a mock audit because you're not going to go out there at night and you're not going to get in a team and things like that. But it's getting pretty close to what an audit, a road safety audit actually is. So you'll get a bit more practice. But as I said, good to get this desktop one done, get the feedback, and that'll help you then for your next assignment. Okay, let's go with that. I'm using my desktop, not what I want you to see there. Display settings. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start with cyclists. And I'm sure we have lots of people who ride bikes, as people are now using that terminology, people who ride bikes as opposed to cyclists, drivers, people who ride bikes, and the like. Anyway, that's a terminology thing. I'm not sure exactly why that is. More to humanize that, I think. Cyclists may conjure up an image of maybe just that lycra-clad mammal, middle-aged man in lycra. But there's certainly quite a variety of people who ride bikes. So this session, we are going to have a look at requirements of cyclists for safe travel, some technical information regarding cycle paths, shared paths, different cycling facilities, common road safety audit issues for people who ride bikes, and basic cycling facility treatments and terminology. Now, again, I know some of you are absolutely super passionate about bike infrastructure and have written guides and certainly done lots of projects. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of input. I will sort of skate across at a high level here because we just don't have the days and days to do this. My colleague runs a couple of day course or 4-module online course, cycling infrastructure, which is goes a lot more into detail about a lot of these things that I'll be skating over. But I think for auditors, it's about that thinking about the specific issues for cyclists and knowing some of the facilities and pointing you at the documentation where you can delve into that particular issue in detail and understand a bit more about it as it arises in your project. So sort of thinking about generic requirements for people who ride bikes, some generic categories which are fairly well accepted that help a lot. Separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, smooth or good surface. Speed maintenance is an interesting one when we're thinking about safety, but we'll go speed maintenance, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that shortly. Connectivity and information. And I will go through these to a degree, but I suppose at that very highest level, I mean, just simply trying to think like a cyclist or think like a person who's riding a bike. And when we did that pedestrian intersection look, and I sort of briefly talked about trying to put yourself in the different shoes or in the saddle and in the driver's seat, and then do lots of different maneuvers. That's the same for cyclists. You're gonna imagine riding along. Where are you going to be riding? Where are you going to position yourself? Where would you go to do a right turn, a left turn, to go straight through? How are you going to get past this area? Am I going to feel safe here? What am I going to do? Are there things going to be blocked? So you're really going through, asking yourself lots of questions. Sometimes you might even decide to jump on the bike and ride through the area to get that feel. And certainly we do that for a lot of certainly shared path audits or schemes where there are a lot of bike riders. And it can help you see and identify a few other things. And as we think about that, I mean, what are we talking about as a cyclist or a person who rides a bike? There is such a variety, and there's some great diagrams out there. The Dutch Cycling Embassy puts out some pretty good stuff, and others have certainly put out lots of diagrams of the raft of people who ride bikes. We've got old, young, we've got people riding for recreation, utilities, cargo bikes. There's just a huge variety, and for us as auditors, we've got to be sort of conscious of that, and then thinking about what the dominant or most of the riders into the future will be, and are we catering for it? But a general rule of thumb is this 8 to 80, and thinking about an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, and will it be safe and something that they would feel comfortable riding through. Us as road safety auditors, much more concerned with will it be safe than will it be comfortable. It's important that we, create things that encourage active transport, encourage this wonderful, sustainable, and healthy ways to travel. And there's lots of people working on that. But remember, our focus is the safety of it. And if a scheme, discourages bike riding, but will be done safely, it's not our role as auditors to point that out in the audit report in the finding. Okay, you might want to put a little note somewhere if you feel that that's an important thing to say, or write a separate little note or the like. But remember, the audit is actually having to point out crashes. So let's talk about some documentation. I mean, the Part 6, the Guide to Road Safety Part 6 includes within the prompt lists that we talked about a section on cyclists, lots of information there. It was enhanced in this most recent one. The checklists in the New Zealand guidelines, the 2013, also includes thinking about cyclists at a little more of a generic level. And then there's these other documents from around the Australia, New Zealand area, but also around the world that could help you. There's a shared path audit guideline from the Victorian government. Auckland Transport has some good documentation, cycle infrastructure document. There's a few more I've put there that I think have some good elements. And then from around the world, we've got the Crow manual, which I think might have been one of our trivia questions early on. The design manual for bicycle traffic from the Netherlands. That's sort of the most comprehensive one. We've got some stuff out of the US, you can see there. So there's actually quite a lot of documentation available, and it's really an area that over the past decade has just really started to explode in terms of guidance from a strategic planning perspective all the way down to a detailed design perspective, or a pretty detailed design perspective. So lots and lots and lots of information available. We put some of those, quite a few of those into Moodle, so you'll be able to download them as you please. I'm pretty sure most of them are available freely to download, except for the Chrome manual. You have to purchase that one. Okay, let's go with just some common audit findings and thinking about the difference between bikes and other vehicles utilizing the road environment, or thinking about shared paths and some of the specific nuances for bikes. But the use of longitudinal grates is a particular one that I sort of say is the 101 of bicycle road safety audit findings. And I mean, I say it's the 101, it's not the biggest source of death or serious injury, but it's such a particular issue for riders. And what we commonly find is that new designs don't tend to put longitudinal grates like this. But we do find that potentially a new design pushes riders into an area where there is a longitudinal grate, and that's a really important one for that site inspection. When you see it on site and you realize that actually what's going to happen now, the riders are going to change and they're going to be going through here, and there's a existing longitudinal grate there, and there's no upgrade of that grate coming along. So that's the sort of scenario where we would want the auditor to intervene and suggest the use of a bicycle-friendly drainage grate there. So this is one that, interestingly, I've done now 2 legal case expert witnesses for, where one of them was on the public road network existing, and the road controlling authority was not looked on favourably in the fact that they had existing hazards which were very well known, and they had no scheme in place to be looking at these or upgrading them in any sort of systematic manner as funding was available. It was just, they just sort of sat there, and if there was a particular issue, they would fix it. So there was that one, and then the other one was even, I suppose, a bit worse, which was a shopping centre, and it was a big car park, and there was lots of these big gaping longitudinal grates in the car park, and the shopping centre went through an upgrade extension and added a whole massive area for bike parking and a big encouragement of cycling. And the route really to get to all that cycling parking just took you down longitudinal grates. And nobody had done that sort of wider thinking about the implications of that and the safety issues. And so no road safety audits were done on that, no independent checks, nobody identified it. And it was until somebody was pretty seriously injured going through the car park to park their bike where they'd been told to, and fell, front wheel into the grate and seriously injured themselves. So obviously in that case, the property developer was, and the centre owner were to pay out. While I'm on common issues, another one I thought I'd just bring up. So this is an arrangement of a T intersection signalised, some bike facilities being added, very popular cycling corridor. And so some really, good stuff, some threshold treatments, which is going to help cyclists, but also pedestrians, green paint, bike boxes. But the way that the signals configure here on Blythe Street is that vehicles turn out and go right, and vehicles, they get a left turn arrow to go in at the same time. So if we've added a bike storage box here, what we'll have is, cyclists will come down here, they'll store here, ready to go, but then we'll have the green arrow, and the car will come up behind and get that green arrow. Now, this is one where I sort of scratch my head and ponder and say, how do I risk rate that? Because, I can't, I think it would be super rare that somebody would, have a cyclist directly in front of them and miss seeing them but be so focused on the green turn arrow and the like. But we're certainly going to have some road rage issues there, and our infrastructure is going to create that road rage due to the fact that we're saying bikes you can store here, but then telling somebody, okay, you can, this is your opportunity to turn. So that's bad. Where I can sort of play it out to some crash scenarios is more the potential then for that car to go out and around or create those weird maneuvers. Luckily, I mean, that sort of stuff gets fixed pretty quickly when you report it. So the risk rating is somewhat not as important there, but it's an interesting one to ponder in terms of how you would risk rate that. Because remember, the risk rating is not about externalities in the sense of road rage, environmental impact, community expectation, cost, anything like that, right? It's not our realm. It's important stuff for a project manager, but it's not our realm as auditors. Okay, so this one's going to be a find the issues. So it's not a poll that comes up. It's just going to be that I'll put up a site, and you're going to, be an existing conditions auditor, and I'll give out a prize here for the person who can tell me which country this is. It's not New Zealand. You can tell me which country this is, and then I'll also give a prize as a particular issue, and the first one to put that in there can have a prize. So who do we get here? Rahul, I think, is correct. Wales. So I've been brushing up on my Welsh, and that translates to cyclists dismount, if I'm correct. All right, but enough of the country picking. Let's go with what are some of the potential issues? So pop your ideas down. Issues for people who ride bikes that you would report as an auditor if you were doing, maybe they're doing some upgrades to this and you were looking at it, or as we said, potentially existing conditions. Okay, I'm seeing some good stuff come in there. Okay, so I'm going to give a prize briefly just to Pip for spotting that longitudinal grate, because I've just taken you through that one, and it's good to see that. And eagle eye there. Well done, Pip. Maybe watching this on the big screen, but you can see there is a longitudinal grate, and that's a funny one, because obviously for anybody riding on the road there, it's fine. I mean, it's not the best, but it's okay. But right where the bike park leads is where we're going to see that issue. So well spotted there. But let's look through the other things that have sort of come out. We've had quite a few people talking about this fence and the sightline issues. So that's a good one and an interesting one, and certainly as we have paths, coming up to roads and crossing roads, we do have often sightline impediments. Oh, hang on a second. I think I missed there. Shane was also there with longitudinal grate. So apologies, Shane. You were in first, but now I'm going to have to give both of you a prize, because I did say Pip can have a prize. So Kathy, I hope you're noting that. So we've got vision, yeah, and then some people talking about the tactile ground surface indicators and this sway of amount of stuff, which will be a potential issues for riders. So that's an interesting point. There's a good question in there from Mark around why would you ask cyclists to dismount for this? And I suppose the reality is, would they? And do we want cyclists to slow down maybe? Are there ways that we could do this? The common design philosophy around this is not to use those sort of cattle grid style, well, not cattle grid, but cattle gate style things where you make the cyclists go in and to the left and to the right to ensure that they really slow down at these points. It may be a mix there of that, trying to provide that continuity for cyclists, encourage cyclists and the like, but generally they're not seen favourably anymore. What would be more favourable is if this was a genuine, really trying to encourage cycling in this area and the like, would be to create priority across this and ideally raise that up, and that's going to be a pretty nice thing. But we're still really left with this. The raising of it will help, but this sightline impediment. I dare say this is the old classic of the sightline issues here, and the engineer or the responsible officer of this area it's just too hard. I'll just pop this up. It's too hard otherwise. And that's a very sort of, I suppose, dangerous mentality for us to get into. That I put a warning sign up, or I put a sign up and told them to do it, but knowing full well that it's not going to happen. And we do just, this picture always, to me, highlights the ridiculousness of the use of a cyclist dismount sign. Sure, many of you that ride bikes do what I do and ignore every cycle dismount sign I've ever seen. I've never in my whole life dismounted when I saw that sign, and I'm a generally law-abiding citizen. But it's just not going to happen. So we need to kind of factor that into our thinking and be realistic. And our job as auditors is to help and put that realistic bent on it, to say the cyclists are not going to be dismounting every time you put that sign up. So let's look at the underlying issue and why that needs to happen, and are there ways that we can try to create this continuity, because often the cyclist dismount sign is there because there is a risk and trying to lessen the risk, but this is really not going to do that. Anyway, are those driveways? I think those are, there's some driveways and some access, minor access roads as well. So it's all just a bit crazy. Certainly, I mean, these days in New Zealand or in Australia, that sort of thing, we have easily available ways to create that continuous priority of the shared path through there. Surely it isn't real. Unfortunately, it is. Now, Kathy, fill me in. I'm seeing lots of things popping in. I'm missing lots, no doubt. Is there anything I need to catch up on?
Well, there's a comment about priority for walking and cycling relies on cars not making mistakes. So there's still the need to check/dismount. Sorry,
I'm hardly hearing you there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Is that any better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay, sorry. So the priority for walking and cycling relies on cars not making mistakes. So there still is a need to check or dismount?
Yeah, so yes and no. I'm going to show you a little bit later on in this session what I consider generally best practice in cycle and pedestrian priority across a road, where drivers are provided, a lot of information and have some good geometric features in to assist in them providing that priority. I do like, sight lines to be open for riders and walkers to be able to see approaching cars, even though they have priority, and to think about that and ways to enhance that a little bit. But yeah, let me show you some stuff later on in this session.
There was an earlier question about helmets. What are your thoughts on the schools of thought about helmets?
Yeah, I'm going to... Yeah, there's this... I don't know. And that's not something...
Many a helmet debate in the office.
It's not something I... Yeah, I have done the required research. I can tell you all the claims I hear, but I don't like to in a forum or a workshop like this say definitively one way or another without actually really having some background on research. So I'm going to say I don't know, and there are better people to ask than me on the helmet debate. I mean, logically to me, I think, why wouldn't you wear a helmet? It's going to do something. I've seen the drop tests for helmets, and that's pretty impressive, and forces and things like that. But there's lots of people who talk about it decreasing riding, but I don't know if there's any proof around that. But that's a myth, or maybe it is true. Who knows? People don't ride because they have to, it messes their hair up and those sort of things. The increased risk taking perception is another one. But yeah, so really, I'm sorry, I don't have an informed answer on that one. Kathy, maybe you have an informed answer.
No. I think what you've said sums it up nicely. I've heard the arguments about helmet hair and that sort of thing. Not a problem for you, obviously, but a problem for
I saw Mark's coming in there. Yes, that's why I wear a helmet. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's talk about infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay. Here's an audit report that was done. It was one I did with a colleague a while back. It was an interesting one, and interesting for a couple of reasons. But we were looking at it was a post-construction road safety audit. So the one just after they finished, and they're wanting to get tick off. There's a big new subdivision, and the houses were sort of being built, and the infrastructure around it was being built, and so we were out there checking out a whole lot of different aspects of this, and it was a requirement of the developer to get this post-opening audit, and the council was very interested in lots of aspects of it. And one of the things we looked at was this: they'd elected to, in the design at some point, elected to put a shared path right up on property boundary. So essentially where a footpath or a sidewalk would be, but right up on property boundary as a shared path, and encouraging cyclists, not just of kids and the like, but all types of cyclists to utilize that facility. A little bit narrower than you'd expect. But one of the challenges associated with that was the fact that on quite a number of the houses, we saw that the garage was there and a high fence came right up there. So it's kind of a bit like what we're seeing there. And so obviously the issue was the vehicles exiting and cyclists traveling along here at, probably not, super high speeds, maybe up around 20 kilometers an hour if they were pushing along on a shared path. Obviously on the road, cyclists can get up to higher speeds than that, but in this sort of environment, maybe 20 would be going, ticking along pretty fast. And so we've obviously got the issue there. So you can see the write-up there, but so recommendation: consider measures to open up sight lines. The properties, this may include removing the first panel of the fence, reducing the height to open up sight lines, supporting, because we're not sort of eliminating the possibility of this sort of stuff happening, we're lessening it. So, and then some, sight lines are particularly important to improve where the crossover is located, in position where exiting vehicles on the left. So this scenario where we've got the picture. And we also noticed some properties had vegetation which looked like it would grow up and do essentially what that fence would do, even when there were nice sight lines. So just sort of monitoring on that. The safe system energy would be within tolerable, because it's that initial impact force we're interested in of speeds, angles, vulnerability, and we know about that 30 kilometre per hour for cyclists. Now, this one was a real bit of a head scratcher, because you also kind of have these horrific visions of small kids and being run over, and that's not that initial safe system impact energy. It's another sort of realm of risk. But ended up going with the within tolerable on this one. So, before I go to that, the really particularly interesting aspect of that, I mean, I think that's sort of just common road safety audit sort of finding stuff. Ideally, it would have been picked up at design stage. It wasn't. I don't think they had audits going on at design stage. They were more conformity with their precinct structure plan and set designs for subdivisions. And this is where it got really interesting, because this finding was sent back. So the audit report was sent back to us as an audit team, and they said, yep, thanks for these findings. It's great. This particular one, can you please remove that, because that setup conforms with our precinct structure plan and design requirements for subdivisions. So they've met what we require. And we said, no, sorry, we can't, because we believe it's an issue. And it caused, a lot of angst from the council and the developer as well, and a bit of a fight there. And yeah, you will find these as you audit, where you're obligated to report what you see as a safety issue, regardless of how much trouble that's going to cause them in what they do. And as an independent auditor, being engaged often by the person who doesn't want any issues, and you're reporting issues, you get yourself in some, I suppose, areas where you've got to understand your ethical obligations as well. So anyway, we've never worked for that client again, because they haven't come back to us. That's okay. This one went through, but they did change their planning scheme, or the precinct structure plans and the standard sort of setups to alleviate this. And I think then the council had to pay to rectify each of those. So it's an interesting one. It shows you some of the practical real world challenges of auditing out there. Keep the questions coming in as we go. I think Wayne's popped in there, and rightly so, pointed out the emergence of e-bikes and the greater speeds that causes. Not only the greater speeds, but the fact that greater speeds will be achieved by far more vulnerable people. And I'm sure lots of you have seen the sort of older people now traveling along at great speed on their e-bikes, and so the vulnerability sort of kicks up significantly from that, and scooters too. It's the excitement of scooters across Australia and New Zealand is certainly there. Surface issues, of course, something that could be an issue for a rider if they were to hit it and come off, but also thinking about the lines that they will take to avoid. If there are surface deficiencies, cyclists will move around those or travel in a line around those, which could put them into more dangerous areas. So just sort of trying to think that through. So certainly surface deficiencies is something that comes up a lot for when you're particularly thinking about riders. Here's another sort of example of an interesting way. And I'm just using lots of examples here to help you get your head in the thinking of cyclists. I mean, first thing to note about this intersectional alignment, and you do see this a bit, is just the misalignment of lanes. So we've got, the lane here goes directly onto the footpath. This lane goes directly into that lane. So we know in these scenarios, like, first of all, when you're reviewing as an auditor design of the addition of an extra road or these sorts of things, or any changes, the alignment of lanes is always a good one to check. And you'll see, auditors and designers looking down plans to see how things line up when they have physical plans. You can just draw lines. But what we know happens here are these side swipe crashes, because it's usually this driver thinks that that's their lane. They're sort of half aware of what's going on. And this driver's obviously trying to get in there, and we get sideswipe crashes. And they're minor. There's scrapes, beeping, angry people, panel beater. Death and serious injury, not very frequent at all in that crash scenario. But when we put a bike coming through in that mix as well, and they're trying to get to their patch in there, and all of this is happening, they end up the ones that are killed or seriously injured in these incidents. Motorcyclists as well don't fare very well in these scenarios. So we've got to try and be, weeding those out and creating facilities. So the old drop off of the bike lane and then is not the best way to do it. There's potential for us to create facilities that come through for bikes, which can be really quite nice, can be expensive, but there's some pretty good options in those senses. You can have some signal phasing options and the like. Similarly, where you have a stand-up lane at an intersection, so you're basically creating an extra lane as you come up to the intersection, pump more cars through there in each phase, and then they sort of drop back to their one lane there. Again, you've got this nasty point where a car is coming up here at speed, and where are they looking? Over their shoulder to see if they've got past that car and merged in. Again, I don't have great answers for this. I think the extension of that, advanced phasing for cyclists can be helpful. It is a challenging one. I think Aaron's talked there about continuity line on that intersection alignment, which I'll go back to. So different continuity lines or the use of raised pavement markers. So I think they've got raised pavement markers in this one to try to guide and help through. So RPMs are the ones you'd use here. RRPMs, raised reflective pavement markers, are the ones you use for lane divides and the like, but these ones are a sort of dome-shaped one. Okay, so roundabouts have become quite an area of interest for cyclists, and we know roundabouts provide that wonderful benefit in safety for passenger vehicle crashes, and we know it provides good safety for motorcyclists, albeit the fact that it's not as good as car to car, and so there's some particular interest there. Pedestrians appear to get good safety benefit from roundabouts, but certainly they are not helpful for pedestrians, and they don't encourage walking. And my belief in the research that I've seen on that is that it has insufficiently accounted for the change in exposure of pedestrians, like as in pedestrians just will not cross at roundabouts, especially multi-lane roundabouts and the like. They will go well downstream and cross, or just completely stops them walking, especially older people. They're just not able to cross this and won't. So, but the lower speeds are good. And this is the sort of old way that it would be looked at in a small urban roundabout to have your bike facilities. You've got bike lanes on the approach. The idea was to keep the bikes as far away from traffic as possible there, still in the circulating carriageway though. It was pretty quickly discovered that this was not, not actually, I'll say pretty quickly discovered. It was eventually discovered due to lots of crashes of bikes at roundabouts for a particular sort of crash, which was called a look but failed to see crash, or look but they look but failed to see, look but did not see. You got vehicle approaching, they've looked out there, bikes come in, and they've run over the bike or hit the bike or the like. Now, this particular philosophy is behavioral psychologists just love it. It's their sort of like the dream, and as do the human factors experts, because you're essentially trying to unpack why would somebody look directly at something they know they have to give way to, but not give way. And they go into all sorts of different wonderful theories, threat theory, and this and that and other things and the like. That they're looking for something else, and it takes them that extra time to process that that's also something. The bike is also something that you've got to stop for. The positioning out from where they're exactly looking for things and the like. So, amongst all, and then there was also the other crash type, which was where cars would accelerate through, try to overtake the bike because they've got this space, and it wasn't great. So the more contemporary guidance is around pushing cyclists, or trying to get cyclists to claim the lane. So it's actually in these low speed urban environments using these symbols, and prize for the person who can tell me what that symbol is called first, which is to say that cyclists and well done, look at that. Who was first? Kathy, you can work out who said Sharrow or Sharrows first, but there are a lot of them that came in almost all at the same time. So Sharrow. So it's a mashing of shared and arrow. It's to show that a cyclists and cars should share that bit of road. And the challenge I have with Sharrows, I like the use of them in different environments and the like, is that if under our 8 to 80 design principle thinking, it's really not going to quite cut it. Certainly, I will not be encouraging my 8-year-old to claim the lane over, large 4-wheel drives and trucks and the like. It's not quite there. But certainly for commuter cyclists and others, it can, and it does seem to provide a better positioning, so that it's a little more likely to be seen for that look to fail to see and the like. But I'm going to show you some other ways that roundabouts can be thought about for cyclist safety, and some really, I suppose, exciting ways that those have been achieved. 2-lane roundabouts particularly challenging before I get into some of those treatments, because not only do you have those issues that we were sort of talking through there, but you have this challenge of a cyclist coming up here that wants to turn right. Is either going to have to get themselves over across traffic there and then do this challenging right turn maneuver, or sort of come into here and try and get around. And it's a real battle from that perspective. We also have the dynamic visual obstruction challenge of a vehicle here and the vehicle coming up here. And this happens for cars as well, but their sight lines get blocked by the other vehicle. And a bike is often the one where, the driver here is saying, why is this person stopping? There's nothing coming. And they'll put the foot down through here just as the cyclist is coming through. So 2-lane roundabouts particularly bad and challenging. And so there's some different designs, some different concepts, some different treatments. Certainly the Netherlands just leading the way in this space, have been for many years. So we are now sort of adapting and taking Dutch designs of roundabouts and adapting them. And I mean, the theory sort of would go, you've got either a separated facility, or if it's an on-road bike lane, that you'd get the cyclist off the lane, provide priority across these 1-lane ones. And then in theory, you would go underneath these major roads. Very expensive to do. I mean, the Dutch do it all the time, but anyway, If not, you're providing these sort of spots where it's a much, I suppose, clearer, cleaner way to try and make that crossing maneuver and then that crossing maneuver. And so you're getting better safety outcomes. There's still challenges with that, but that's a that is a possibility. And for that one lane, more urban style roundabout, this is the gold standard, really. And I know there's interest around New Zealand. I don't know if you've yet got any protected roundabout designs or installations yet. Somebody will probably be able to tell me if there are any. But essentially, you're creating cyclist and pedestrian priority as a ring around the outside, as you can see here. So as the bike comes up, they sort of go off the road and they go around there. And if they want to do a right turn, they'll continue on down there, or they drift off like that. So that's Moray Street. There it is built, operating beautifully. We certainly have some ride-throughs of that, which we can send people links to if they're interested. Certainly one we analyse in a lot of detail in our cycling infrastructure course. You know, it's got enough room for a bike to, a car to prop there. So you've got, you know, they're out of the way a bit. You know, I really have a lot of respect for the council that did this, the local government that did this. And they did the SIDRA analysis, the traffic modelling, and it did not show great things for the vehicles. And they just said, we don't care. This is a cycle priority route. It's a pedestrianised area. And if it takes cars longer to get through there, we're okay with that. And then they proceeded to just run with that line to anybody that wrote in and complained. well done. So it's pretty impressive. From a safety perspective, performing really well. There's some little tweaks that you would probably improve in future ones, but you know, generally operating really well, and about 80% of cyclists using that facility, and the others are, you know, just continuing on through as they usually would.
Ken, just some comments on this one. So there's some, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a bit.
Just, okay. There's some new subdivisions in Auckland that there's some protected roundabouts going in. And a question about, there's a real reluctance by some to put zebras in on the entry and exit of roundabouts. What would a safety auditor be looking for in that design?
Yeah, well, great question. The safety issues is the key there. And I would dare say the reluctance would not be necessarily to do with safety. Maybe framed as a safety issue, but it may be more potential queuing of vehicles into the roundabout because they're waiting for pedestrians to cross, which is really just a traffic congestion issue, not necessarily a safety issue. One of the things I always advocate for, though, is to raise that, make it a raised pedestrian crossing around a roundabout. Setback is nice to have one car, and that's not really a safety issue. That's just it can flow a little bit better for vehicles if you set it back at least that one vehicle. But you know, generally just a good thing all round. Yeah. Okay. So other ideas popped up, and as auditors, we're sort of the ones to try to identify if new design features are going to cause issues, are they going to help out a little bit. Here's an example being this little thing, which one of my designers calls the mammal pouch, which is where, you know, cyclists are given this little spot to prop and wait to be able to make that, so they don't have to cross all of this to get out there and mix with it, or they don't have to sort of make this, you know, head check and the like. I'm Yeah, it's an interesting one to ponder. You know, I've got concerns about, you know, larger vehicles coming around here and tracking and mirrors and things sweeping around. I do like the idea from the cyclist perspective of having that spot to prop to break up that. Will it be sort of well utilized and understood? Unsure. Couple more on application. I'm going to move a little bit quicker here just because I'm conscious we've got to introduce you to your audit. So this is actually a bike facility that they've designed here in this new roundabout to get the bikes off the road through the roundabout. So it's a nice sort of idea, and it looks pretty good as a design. And then they went and built it, and this is how they built it. And so the challenge as an auditor, I look at that is a cyclist can actually know that that's their spot and it's purpose built for them. Okay, we've got a little cyclist only sign. But really, I think a lot of cyclists are going to get this point and think, oh, well, okay, my nice cycle lane's done. I'm off now, mixing it with traffic. So not only is this a less safe option, this is a waste of a massive amount of infrastructure and money in building this purpose-built facility. And you know, so this is where potentially a small sway of green paint. Now, somebody needs to remind me. You know, New Zealand uses green as well. But you know, the idea that you can utilize some green pavement markings to guide a cyclist to utilize particular areas and the like, or a different route is now something that's often done. The original use of green pavement markings or coloured pavement markings is around a conflict point, not a guiding direction. So you would put that where a vehicle and a cyclist would conflict, and that is to alert the drivers to the fact that a bicycle could be coming and could be present, and this is a particular spot to be looking out for. But it's evolved to be used a little bit in this way. Okay, dooring. Dooring, certainly an issue. It's a challenging one. It's thinking about space that riders have. The initial impact from the door is often within tolerable levels most of the time. So, you know, get some injuries, but it's very rare that a direct door strike from a cyclist is a death or a high level serious injury. The secondary crashes associated with this are pretty bad though, where the cyclist hits or clips and goes into the traffic lane. And that's where we see some pretty bad incidents. We've seen deaths, number of deaths associated with that in recent times, and lots of serious injuries. So it's something we're quite, you know, concerned about. So really challenging cross sections, and it's a big, you know, land use planning challenge. These sorts of areas you might think, oh well, could you not paint or do some different things? These are challenging because this is actually a running lane during part of the day, so the cars are removed. So you'd have that sort of facility in the middle of the road, which is not great. If you do have more permanent parking spots, okay, bike symbols are a little bit better. But really, again, so the gold standard is to move your parking into the road and to provide that bike facility curbside, nice and wide, and those Copenhagen style lanes. So you can see some here from Christchurch. Some of you probably ride this often, and you know, that generally is seen as pretty exceptional. So cyclist priority, here are some examples. Again, your configurations will be different. The principles should be fairly the same. Make it raised, make it very clear who's got priority. It's essentially creating the cycle shared path or the shared path as a road. And this is an intersection in its own right, and the priority of the intersection is given to the shared path. That's kind of how it works. An example of potential how it could look for the driver. Thanks for the photo, Kathy, in passenger seat there. And the cyclist seeing this sort of being of continuous priority. Coloured a little bit different, so there's a bit of maybe more alertness, good sight lines, and that's the kind of thing we're looking at. I like little features that are thoughtful about cyclists. Local area traffic management squeeze points, be that a chicane, a one-way slow point, even an urban roundabout where you squeeze the road down to slow vehicles. That's great. If you're requiring cyclists to squeeze in there as well, it can cause an issue. But this one, I think, is just a nice, elegant design of a one-way slow point. So vehicles are going to come up and slow down because only one of them can fit through, and they do that thing, and one-way slow points work pretty well. Cyclists get a nice, clear run through without being squashed up and squeezed in that. So those sort of things are good. In terms of shared paths, we know particular concerns and issues that arise when you do shared path auditing. Most often these are in practice, certainly around Australia and around the world, are done as existing conditions. So you're looking for issues on the shared path for cyclists. It may be termed different things in New Zealand in different situations, or as Mike talked about earlier, the existing condition stuff that is done. And some principles apply for the intersection of paths, just like they do for the intersection of roads, where we want clear priority, good sight lines, advanced warning, guidance, ideally 90-degree if it's a priority style intersection, and reducing speed. So the one over here is a bit unclear who has priority and where you go. Here's another one which is pretty unclear. If you're riding down this bit, kind of looks like you have priority through there. Yet this is actually the main path through there that's been going on, and so it's a bit. These are just priority issues, so clearing that up. Of course, drop-offs are an issue. You've got to think about cyclists, people riding, and dogs and kids and things on the path, other things going on. So these large hazards on the edge of path are something we want to think about. And drop-offs, of course, the same. And different varied hazards. There's good guidance a lot of the time on what's sort of generally acceptable as distance or clear zone style distance for particular hazards on paths. And things within paths that separate can be hazards themselves, like fences or like this. And lots of different issues that I can take you through, but I'll keep moving on. I think most of these will be fairly obvious. Fencing becomes particularly interesting, and you've got to be thinking about particular fencing for cyclists, not just any run-of-the-mill fence, because catching a pedal, a handlebar, and these sort of things are common issues for cyclists. So this fencing is not particularly good. This is more your very much a cyclist-friendly design of a fencing. There are some pretty good standards and guidelines available on which fencing is appropriate in these areas. Shared paths often go near roads, and protection utilising road safety barriers is often done. You need to think about the back of the barrier system as a hazard for a rider when it's your posts exposed like this one. It's really great that there's that protection from vehicles that leave the road, but the back of that can be an issue. And that's certainly one. Again, road controlling authorities have been successfully sued for injuries associated with bikes hitting the back of these. So you can back to back your W-beam systems. You can provide there's different arrangements of coverings and the like that can assist in not having those exposed posts. I talked a little bit about where you'd block vehicles coming in and how you might do that. Well, I didn't contextualize it in that sense, but this is to stop vehicles getting into that area and driving around. The challenge is, especially at night, this is quite a hazard, and the chain there is going to be even worse. A rider, coming along at night, trying to avoid that. I think that plastic bag was probably tied there by somebody to warn other cyclists of this or something like that. We don't want that sort of stuff. If we do have hazards in the path and we have to, like this cable stay, which you would ideally not have it there, but this is a pretty good setup. Flexible bollards with good good nighttime reflectivity and some line marking to warn on the approach and highlighting the hazard itself as well. There are these, particular thematic audits, cycling audits, pedestrian audits, motorcycle audits. They are in Moodle, and you can have a read of that. It's just giving you a bit more information about things you might take out if you're doing a cyclist audit, how you might look at things particular, where you would draw the line on which issues you would and you wouldn't look at in particular issues for cyclists. Kathy, anything I need to cover before I jump into motorcyclists?
Yeah, there was a question about, we're just going to go back, and I thought I'd just bring it up to save you. You can see that?
Yep.
Just checking with you, Sol, is this the slide that you meant? At a glance, it looked like it wasn't clear that the road users still had priority. So I'm not sure if this clears it up. No. No. Further along.
Sorry, what's the, is it not clear? Oh, that might be that one. Yeah, that's not the best one I've seen. I'd like to have seen that raised and I suppose
this one here. That one.
The one that you took. Anyway, but.
Incidentally, that one's actually changed to a stop sign just recently.
Oh, okay. That is interesting.
I'll share the photo. And another comment came through about that type of barrier. So that was when you're talking about the barriers towards the end there, can deflect up to 1.5 meters, so might prevent the vehicle entering the shared path, but not stop the cycle being swiped by the barrier.
Yeah, you got to think about your speed of vehicles and yes, deflection space. That was yeah, you're right. Absolutely think about that barrier choice, deflection, and separation in that sense as well.
We might have a quick break if that's okay, Ken. I know you've got a bit more to cover, but maybe just a 2-minute break.
Yeah, all right, 2-minute break.
Sorry.
That's all right. A little bit late. Okay. So, and very similar to cyclists in the sense of what we're going to cover, the requirements for motorcyclists for safe travel is sorry, did I drop out there, Kathy?
Yes, you certainly did. You're back?
I'm back, and just check if you can see my slides now.
Yes.
Okay, so motorcyclists 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured on a traveling from A to B than compared to a car. So that's amazingly significant, and there's a lot of factors in that. The vulnerability, the small nature of it, the inherent instability with bikes and the like. But the reality is we license riders, we register bikes, it is a legal activity on the public road network, and thus we kind of have a responsibility. In fact, we do have a duty of care to do what we can, what is reasonably practical for us to do to protect motorcyclists. And so we've got to think about that in our design of road infrastructure as well. A lot of road infrastructure design is car or truck orientated and hasn't thought about unique needs of motorcyclists. A lot of stuff works just as well, but it's something for us to consider. So that's where the Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly suite of documents came out. I was involved in the original ones of these back in the day, and certainly New Zealand has a version of the Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly. We have just released a new version of that, but you again, these documents are in Moodle, so you'll be able to have a look at them, and they just go through particular features of the road infrastructure that particularly increase risk for motorcyclists above that of other vehicles. So when I'm thinking about auditing and thinking about motorcyclists, I sort of use these 5 S's, and I've talked to you about some of you about this before, but sight, surface, signs, strike, and speed. And when we go back to our risk and we say, well, what do we got here? Sight, sorry, hidden that slide. But sight, surface, and signs, they influence the likelihood of crashes. Strike is where the crash is happening. What is the rider hitting? What's hitting the rider? What's the severity of it all? So that's severity. And exposure, the speed influences both likelihood and severity, because that will give more chance for a rider to avoid a crash, to see it and the like, or a car to avoid a motorcyclist if they're at lower speeds, and should be an and, not a plus, and severity. So if the crash happens at lower speed, there's lower energy transfer, and it's a lower severity crash. So let's just briefly go through these. I mean, we're not rocket science here, that motorcyclists are smaller than cars, thus they're easier hidden behind sightline impediments, behind other vehicles. Dynamic visual obstruction goes up for riders. We have these little safety margins generally when you think about a motorcycle design vehicle, if you're ever doing that, and that's for the lean that riders utilize while they go around corners, around curves and the like. But there's a little just picture showing a very, very tiny little sign blocking, half, if not more, of a motorcyclist there in comparison. So certainly even power poles, shrubs, signal controller boxes, they're all potential sightline impediments. And in terms of forward sight distance, like riders being able to see what's coming up, that's such an important thing. I mean, it's a generally good principle, and you saw Ferg's presentation talking about that geometric design and how it can be done. If there are alterations, the signage is so critical for riders to understand what they're approaching. Compound curves. I should have given a prize for that, shouldn't I? What that is called, it's called a compound curve, where it has one radius and then it tightens up. Some people would call it a double radius curve, but it's official name is a compound curve, and just extremely hazardous for motorcyclists. Not great for cars, and you may have been in a compound curve at some point as you're driving around and it starts to tighten up, and you go, and maybe even lost a little traction on the vehicle. But motorcyclists inevitably have a speed and a line fairly set based on the radius they see, and then it tightens up and they're really onto the other side of the road. So this sign, often with the curve tightens, is something that's utilised in New Zealand now on popular motorcycle routes where you have a compound curve like this, which is trying to differentiate it between your usual hairpin or other tight curve, because it gets tighter. It's not what you initially see. Here's just an actual real world example of 4 motorcycle run-off road crashes at the one location. And it's a compound curve. You see a radius 252 to a radius 117, so tightening into that radius. And, add extra challenges in unsealed road entering, so you're going to get some gravel wash probably onto the road. So, yeah, just a really bad scenario around for motorcyclists. Again, just sort of showing the sightline challenges. There's the rider sort of hidden behind the tree, and getting out the front of the platoon could be challenges. Surface, just a reminder that motorcyclists lean. There's two small contact patches on the road. The center of gravity is shifted, and so as they lose a little bit of traction, they're pretty much down. Our surface becomes highly important around curves, around areas that riders are braking, on the approach to curves as well, at intersections and the like. So we want that good high skid resistance, consistent surface, as I'm sure all New Zealand roads are like. No, we know there's all sorts of challenges out there. We're going to think about that. Depressions in the surface can destabilize riders, potholes, cracking, the polished up surfaces, so wetting surfaces and the like. Even where patches are placed and how consistent the patches are in terms of changing levels or areas that will open up and break up in the future. So all things we're trying to work through, which can be a challenge. If you do have particular surface hazards for riders, we need to warn riders of them in advance until we can rectify them. This is a particular one on a popular motorcycle route where it's sort of around a curve, and a rider, as they're coming around that curve, they're fairly locked in at the speed that they're going and the line that they're taking, and they sort of see this. The physics really makes it near impossible for them to go inside this. Like, very hard. They'll end up having to go outside that or pull the bike upright, and that'll drift them across anyway. Of course, we use steel plates, often temporary, but sometimes permanent things in the road surface that are slippery, and it's something we need to be trying to minimise, trying to see as auditors, trying to identify that when that's wet, it's very slippery for motorcyclists, for cyclists. It looks pretty big and obvious, but if the rider was trailing behind a truck and maybe it was raining a bit and it was dark, and you can imagine that could present that significant slip hazard, and secondary crashes are often an issue there, where the rider slides into traffic areas and the like. So if they have to be there, there's skid resistant surfacing that can go on top of them. There's obviously coloured treatments to even further enhance them. That one looks like the bolts are sitting up a bit high. They'd be nicer to be having those down. And surface improvements all around are available. Everything from all your good maintenance practices to water blasting to increase skid resistance and the like. So plenty of stuff available. So curbing's an interesting one for motorcyclists. The more mountable the curbing, the better. There's obviously scenarios where we need to use barrier style curb for drainage, but it's quite interesting, the small lips that will destabilize a motorcyclist. And here's a little video that sort of illustrates that. It's really just to illustrate a small lip destabilizing a bike. So yeah, I suppose I don't particularly have a lot of issues with that roundabout design. I think they did actually a pretty nice job in highlighting the curb, but it just shows you that challenge, and then it shows you also that the grab rail that was there, and that stops the bike and brakes. So thinking about those hazards, which I'll talk to you shortly about. One thing I can almost guarantee if you get into road safety auditing is you'll see designs where they want to paint large things on the road at particular locations. Now, a lot of locations, that's fine. It's, very low speed environment. Maybe they want to activate a street or the like, and it's all, very low speed, very urbanized area. Okay, and that's all, very, very low risk and probably going to improve things significantly and keeping vehicle speeds low. There are areas though where we really got to be careful about how that's going to impact on skid resistance and the like. And a particular one that I see, I've seen a handful of times over my career, is the big painting of a stop sign or a give way sign at an intersection, like big coloured stop sign on the approach right at that intersection, because they're having an overshoot problem. Like vehicles are, maybe there's a see-through effect and they go, oh, this will help. Well, what you're actually doing is potentially putting a slippery surface right at the point that a motorcyclist, if they're caught in that, will be slamming on the brakes because they go, oh, it's an intersection, I've got to stop, and then giving that potential sliding into the intersection. This one, another example where it's sort of these large sways and the rider's on a lean and it's not, it's not great. Pop your questions in. I'm moving through this quickly. I apologise. I just got to give Kathy enough time to give you an audit site and the like. So signs, we talked about the compound curve sign. There's particular signs available to warn riders of a particular issue if it's specifically a rider issue. So those are very effective. But in general, motorcyclists are very attuned to signage and warning signs. To warn, inform, guide, control. And motorcyclists are very aware of them. And strike. So interestingly, the study we did quite a while back was looking at motorcyclists on bends and where they crash. And most go to the outside of the curve, a smaller percentage to the inside of the curve. That might look just obvious, but if you do the same analysis for cars, it's about a 50-50 inside to outside of curve crashes due to the ability for a car to overcorrect. So the car comes in a little bit hot, they may overcorrect and go into the inside, and appears about half the time they do, whereas a motorcyclist more often than not doesn't have that ability. So the outside of the curve becomes particularly interesting for motorcyclists. And here's part of your beautiful Coromandel area, popular motorcycle Coromandel loop. And you can see here sort of outside of curve, curve, you've got a bit of a surface issue, and outside of curve is concrete blocks. I'm not sure exactly what their purpose is. I think protecting hearth users potentially. But yeah, particular hazard there for riders. There are different flexible sign products available. Not quite happy with any of them out there. I think this is the best of a bad bunch, which is a sort of compressed rubber, low mount signage option, which will flex with a plastic sign face. Not particularly, it's okay. It's pretty decent. I think we can do a lot better. We're working with a couple of universities and the Victorian government on a particular one to alleviate a lot of the issues with these that still thinks about motorcycle safety. So we'll keep you up to date on that if anything eventuates. And the lean a rider takes around the curve. So here we've got furniture, in this case fencing, quite close to a truck will probably take this out in its swept path at some point, but also a rider as you can see from this staged photo here, leans going around a curve. So there's thinking about that safety envelope and that envelope for riders as well. Okay, so we do put barriers out there on the road network to protect road users from trees, power poles, drop-offs, and the like. And those are specifically designed for cars. A motorcyclist, if they were to strike this, well, about half the motorcyclists that strike barriers are on the surface, sliding. They're off the bike, they're sliding along, they hit the bottom of it. The other half hit it and go over the top very quickly. So the under run, so a motorcyclist hitting the bottom, we can provide these motorcycle underrun devices. So yeah, this one's called Rub Rail. You can get lots of proprietary products available, and they can be retrofitted to existing barrier systems as you go. Here's just, I suppose, shows you some of the severity aspects for riders, but here's motorcycle crash test dummy hitting that post, and see the violence of that. But if we add the underrun protection, we sort of redirect the energy. There's a bit of energy absorption, and that is, it's a survivable crash at the 60 km/h European crash impact speed. But yeah, it's going to shake them up, but they'll survive. And you can see here that it's been added. Little prize. Why has it not been added to this part? Any ideas on that? Yeah, I think Mark was just onto it first. It's the end terminal of the barrier. That is a specifically designed feature of the barrier. It collapses on itself, and really nobody's tested how a underrun protection device would impact on this. And the worry would be that a car would hit this and it wouldn't do what it's meant to do because of this additional thing that's been added. So those are kind of little tweaks you pick up as an auditor. So if you are doing barrier jobs and there's this, make sure you talk to somebody who really knows the intricacies of that kind of stuff. Mark also mentioned the cheese cutter or the cheese grater, the wire rope that motorcyclists talk about. The reality is that, and actually there is a wonderful New Zealand fact sheet, which I was reminded of yesterday, actually, that dispels a whole lot of those myths about the cheese cutter. Kathy, do you reckon we could just pop that into Moodle? Saves me going through the lengthy explanation about why this is not the issue that motorcyclists make it out to be.
Absolutely.
And just there's lots of little tweaks and little issues with how these are sometimes applied. This is underrun protection attached directly to the post, where you want to actually, you need to add a bracket in to set it out flush, because this can create issues where, you know, riders' legs or arms can get into gaps. We also lose that deflection that you saw in that video. So that, you know, that's just incorrect installation. And then you can just get better installation where you're sort of filling gaps in and not directing riders into hard objects and things like that. So thinking logically from that perspective. And I finish on speed, I think, where we have, you know, all the usual things we have out there to influence speed are applicable for riders. Good delineation, you know, use of chevron alignment markers, use of advisory, different advisory speed signs. These are all influential, and regulatory speed limits and the like. Like I talked about for cycling audits, motorcycle audits is available. There's far less people that ride motorbikes available there. So you can often just get an experienced rider, kit them up with a microphone in their helmet, Have an audit team following along behind, and the rider talks about what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and the experience of it. The audit team sort of looking from their perspective, and you can identify that. So there's our rider out the front. We're in the car. Somebody's just concentrating on driving. The rest of us are looking. We're interested in the back of the W beam here that's kind of exposed. If a rider was going along here and a car merged lanes in front of them, pushed them into that, it's sort of an issue. And the rider's out here telling us their issues. Okay, I've got another fact sheet in there on that. In there if you're interested in getting into the details of that. But better let you have a chat about the assignment, Kathy.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, so this is your actual site visit part where we've assigned you a site. Now I'm just going to take you a step back and show you where we are.
You're going to have to speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's still the volume issues. Luckily, I get a new computer.
Yeah.
Is that better? Am I screaming? And
yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So I've popped that article in there that you just mentioned as well. So here we are here where we've assigned you a site. Now, how this works is, as you can see, there's a lot of sites in there, and your name is on the end of the one that is for you, and that's close to the address that you've given us. So if you have moved since that time, or the address wasn't correct or anything like that, please jump in here, have a look at what we've assigned you, and if it is 300 kilometres away, please get in touch with me after this session and we'll find you a new one. Or if you find another one in here you'd rather do, then handle it yourselves. You'll notice that some have 2 people. That just means there's somebody else in the group who lives or works near you, might be a colleague. So if you'd like to get in touch and do the site visit and report together, you can do so. You're accepting that one, Ken? Yeah,
but I need you to write that in. Yeah, we'll get to that one.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that there. Now, the 2 documents you'll need is the template and then also the prompt list section. And we'll go to the template, which is this one here. And what do we do, Ken? Just like the others? Oh, no, sorry. We fill in anything that is highlighted yellow or light.
Light or bright yellow. Anything, yeah. So this one's just a little bit more than the one you're currently doing at the moment, or you've just done, the desktop one, where we've got the sort of full audit report to sort of conform with the New South Wales, the New Zealand guidelines. You'll see there, so there's, if you scroll down a bit, so you just put a bit of information in on that. We've got the table of contents in there. A lot of it's just sort of existing stuff, but we do want you to put in a little bit of information there about the audit you're doing. You're not going to do a nighttime inspection, so that really should be crossed out rather than highlighted, because you're just going to say not applicable. We don't want you going out there at night. And yet, let's keep scrolling through. And you've got your risk matrix there that you're going to be utilizing, and some information there about, that's suggested actions. That's more for the reader of the report. Scope of the audit, you're going to just put a brief explanation. We don't want long wordy things, just a brief explanation and a list of the drawings that you were provided. If they don't have any drawing numbers or anything, just write that, not, no number, no plan number or the like. Not a huge, that's probably far more than we want to see in terms of description of the project, but you do describe the project, put a snip of where it's located, and the like, and then you should be shortly into findings. We've given you that example again, just so you remember sort of what you should be trying to produce, the finding, the crash that's going to happen, the risk factors, any standards and guidelines, a snip clearly shows it, recommendation, and categorization of the recommendation. And you put in there, the risk rating. Yeah, so likely, common, and then the risk up the top goes into no, up further, up, and there it is on the right. Yeah, it's a moderate risk, so the resulting actual risk. So it's all highlighted in the actual template in the next one, so you'll be filling those out. We didn't highlight that frequent unlikely bit, but yeah, that's how you're generating that risk rating. Yeah, thank you.
I'll make edits to it and resave it.
Okay, we only want 3 findings, is it? 1, 2, 3. Yep, that's it. 3 findings. So we're not gonna make you do the full auditing, the nighttime, and you're not in a team and all of that. So we're just gonna refine it down to that. You always sign your audit reports and say who you are, and you sign it off. It's a formal document. We'll get you to do that for the practice purposes, or a fake signature or whatever you want. And then you need, thank you, Kathy, I hadn't seen this, a picture of yourself at the site as to prove that you actually went to the site. One of our requirements for an audit course is that you go to site, you get an understanding of what what the value of going to site, seeing it all live and operating is. So a selfie like that one in your high-vis vest is fine. And that's all we want. We don't want all the photos of the site, all the issues and things like that. Yeah, so if you have any issues with that, please let us know. A few safety things first. We've risk assessed all the sites to ensure that they can be done safely. They're all either real designs or ones that we've made, like our designers have created for you in your area. But yeah, as we say, we've looked, there's safe places to park. You don't need to put yourself into dangerous situations at all in this, as long as you act appropriately. We want you to wear a high-vis vest, and we want you to have a look at a safe work method statement that we've got in there, which it's pretty obvious stuff. It says things like, yeah, I agree not to go out there intoxicated, and stuff that you will be doing anyway in your usual practices. But we want you to just have a look at that and agree to that to ensure that you're going to play your part in being out there safely. And we have assessed the sites as generally low risk. It covers a raft of things, COVID-19 stuff, through to getting to the site and also operating around the site. You're there to see how it operates, see the context of it, think about it with the new design something's going to be built, and you're thinking about the issues that the built design might create. You're not sort of looking at that existing road and finding all the issues with the existing road. You're imagining the upgrades happen. Now, what are the issues that have been created or still exist? But you don't need to get into super detail around lane widths, measuring lane widths, crossfalls, or the like. Just really observe how it all operates, where pedestrians are crossing and those sort of things. You'll probably know the intersection quite well because it's near the place, but looking at it through this different lens is very interesting. Did I miss anything there, Kathy?
What level of audit are we doing?
Yeah, you'll see it's a fairly early level of audit for all of them. We've intentionally avoided detailed design and even functional design because of just the amount of time it takes to pour through all of that and understand and analyze it. We just want, so they're preliminary concept stage, early stage, so there'll be early stage checklists. When's it due? I think it was the next question.
Yeah, so it's due in 2 weeks' time. So basically we have just completed today's session, and we'll have one more webinar, which is next Thursday. So ideally, if you can get out and do your site visit over the next week, and then you've got a little bit of time to write up your report. If you've got questions, or if you're any concerns or anything like that, you can bring them along to the next session. Ken, you'll probably be happy to put someone's up and talk through it and that sort of thing as well. So you've got a couple of weeks where we're giving you a little bit more time, because I know we've given you quite a bit of work so far and some tight time frames.
Yeah, so just try and knock off that desktop one, and then schedule this one in, get out there, and of course get in contact if you need assistance. We could organise a meeting, go through your site if you're really struggling, but just 3 issues, and that's all we need out of you, and a photo of you on site, and writing up to show, yeah, I know what should go in an order report, I know how to identify issues and write them up, and that's all we're looking for.
And there is a quiz, sorry.
Yep.
All right, so we should let everyone go. If there's any questions, any concerns with your site location, please send me an email and get in touch. Otherwise, have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.